Good morning. Tommy Stone here again with another His Life devotional thought for Friday, September the 25th. We've been looking at the His Life devotional book, and this week the focus is on Matthew chapter 6, the Sermon on the Mount, and today especially about the topic of fasting. Jesus talks in chapter 6 about doing good deeds, which we certainly support and like to be a part of, and how to do that in the best possible way. Then he talks about prayer, an area in which we have a lot of experience, but we struggle in private, perhaps, in our prayer life. But there's a lot of material there, and Jesus leads us in the model prayer and our attitude toward him and toward others. And then we get in Matthew chapter 6, verse 16 through 18, to the topic of fasting, something that culturally is not as much a part of our experience of religion, perhaps, as the doing good deeds for others or prayer has been. Certainly is, though, a part of the worship experience or the religious experience in other countries, maybe more than it is here in America. We don't like to miss meals, I guess, here in America, or maybe it just isn't something we're as used to doing. But it's certainly a part of Scripture. Let's read this together and we'll talk about it a little bit. Jesus says, "When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you're fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." Jesus says, when you fast, assuming that the disciple of Jesus would fast. Now, I suppose we could look at that verse and say, well, that's part of what they did in their culture, not so much in ours. And yet, it's hard to continue to make that argument when you look at what Jesus says about fasting, what you read others in Scripture doing in regard to fasting. It's hard to just ignore this practice out of hand. Fasting, of course, is going physically without food for a certain period of time to focus on something important. The best example we have of it in Scripture is Jesus fasting alone in the wilderness for 40 days before beginning his ministry. 40 days seems like a long time to go without food. But Jesus was facing the prospect of beginning his ministry, perhaps being tempted not to go through with God's plan. And certainly that's where Satan attacks him during this period of time in a weak physical state. To not do what he had come to do. But we read about Jesus spending that time apparently in prayer with the Lord, gaining strength. We read about Moses fasting, as our devotional reminds us today, about Ezra fasting. Certainly David fasted in a time of grief when he was facing the prospect of losing a child, which he eventually did lose. Certainly, you and I go through periods of time, especially when we're not feeling well, when we're sad, when we might forego food because we just don't feel like taking in sustenance. But this is a practice that was much more common in this culture that we read about in Scripture. But in Matthew 6, Jesus is assuming that others are going to fast, but they're going to do it in a way that is genuine, that reflects a time of a constant of focus on something that's more important. And so he says, when you do it, don't do it a certain way. Don't do it as the hypocrites were going to do it, making others feel bad for them or realizing that they're being spiritual. You have in the example in Luke 18, the Pharisee in Jesus' story that goes to the temple and prays and says, I fast twice a week, trying to impress God with his performance of fasting. We have rediscovered fasting in the West a little bit. It's become more popular in Christian circles to go without food for a period of time, or to go without something that we count on or that we deem important for a period of time to focus on something more important. It's been more popular in recent days to forego social media or certain things that we have in our lives, to spend that time in prayer, Bible reading, or thinking about more important things. I would encourage you to do it for a period of time, just to experience that, whether it's food or whether it's something else, to focus on God. Many years ago in our youth ministry here, we spent a prolonged period of time in fasting. We took in some juices and some other things to sustain us, but forewent meals to spend time in prayer and study together. It was a very meaningful experience, very powerful experience. You come out of an experience like that, certainly very thankful for the daily provision of food, which sometimes I suppose we take for granted, but also with a renewed interest in spending time with the Lord. So let me recommend that to you sometime, to spend time in fasting, because there is a reward there to be had. Not into others knowing that you're fasting, but into spending time depending on God and connecting with Him. We hope that you're doing well. Again, during these challenging times, we hope that you are getting what you need. Please let us know at the office if you have needs that you want us to be aware of, that we can pray. We hope during this period of time when we've had to go without certain things, like fellowship that we've been able to enjoy, that you're still able to connect with people in a meaningful way. We're thankful for your time today. We hope this has been helpful. And once again, may God bless you this week. May you have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.